I'm William Stobb. I live in La Crosse. I've been writing poetry since I was about 20. I wrote a little bit as a kid, but never poetry, just stories. And I am interested in the story capacities of poems. But I had a literature teacher in college who taught some regional poetry in a kind of a gen ed lit class. And my first response to that was not to want to write the papers that I was supposed to write about them, but like I had my own poems. Like I immediately realized, oh, I have stuff that I could say in that form, and have been doing it really ever since. I worked with the Wisconsin Poet Laureate Commission from 2012 to 17. I've just joined the board of the Mississippi Valley Writers Guild, which is a small community organization out of La Crosse that's just looking to provide community support and workshop-oriented groups for adult writers in the La Crosse area. So I'm working with them now, and I'm on the editorial staff of Conduit, which is out of the Twin Cities, but a small magazine that's been around since the 1990s. It publishes mainly poetry, some prose, and interviews in every issue, and visual arts as well. And I teach creative writing at UW La Crosse, so I get a chance to teach some poetry and short forms of writing there as well. I have 3 full-length books and 3 chapbooks. My most recent book is just out in 2019 called You Are Still Alive, from 42 Miles Press out of the University of Indiana. It was selected by David Dodley for that series. And then I have 2 books with Penguin. Before that, 2012 Absentia, and 2007 National Poetry Series volume, Nervous Systems. And then 3 chapbooks with small presses, and I don't know, I think I might have like all the remaining copies of those. So, but yeah, I have some books out there, and my poems have appeared in lots of journals and reviews over the years. I've been in some anthologies, but not any like big ones. I'm not like in the Norton or anything like that. But yeah, I continue to publish in journals and magazines, and I will start thinking about a next poetry collection pretty soon. I'm still doing events with You Are Still Alive, and enjoying that, and writing some poems, but I haven't sort of started to think about a next collection yet, but I'm sure that'll happen. Yeah, I really have always loved John Ashbery and kind of the milieu of poets that come out of, like there's a wide range of people who come out of that influence, but just the surreal and the strange in the mundane, like the way that if you look closely at or kind of like poke at a normal seeming moment, it can become actually unusual, and you can find the textures of surrealism in the daily, and that kind of poetry just really interests me. So yeah, Ashbery, Dean Young, Donald Ravel, Jory Graham, stuff like that. Well, I mean, I think it's very different for everybody, and there's a lot of space for it to be whatever a person wants it to be. So I wouldn't try to, I would describe my work to somebody, but I wouldn't try to go from my work towards some kind of a description of like what it should be for them. It's a very private and personal genre. I think it's the art experiences that people have with poetry. A lot of people who read poetry also write poetry, and the experiences that people have with poetry are often really, really deep and idiosyncratic and wide-ranging. They can be, poetry can be very public. It can be very private. It can be, activist. It can be isolated, even insular. It can be a place to celebrate. It can be a place to grieve and feel pain and feel outrage. So I just think that it's just a very personal thing for everybody who engages the genre to sort of find what it can be for them. A lot of times that can begin in a notebook, like just write the things that you feel and see and want to say, and then see if they come to a form that looks like it might be a poem. When I'm writing something down, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be verse or prose. My default mode is usually short, intense engagements and small pieces. I have written some longer fiction. I had a CWW award-winning story last year, the Zona Gale Award. But my fiction engagements are like something will happen, and I'll have an idea for a short story, and then I'll have to try to write it, and I have a hard time. It's hard for me to get through prose projects. They work out sometimes, but a lot of times they don't. It's just so many words. How do you make them all fit together, But I don't necessarily so in terms of poetry itself and the use of verse versus like a prose poem form, I increasingly just really see the page or the engagement as an open space, like where you can use the line break if you want. You don't have to. You can move within a single piece between sections that are verse and sections that are prose. I really enjoy figuring that out with each piece. It's part of, I think, it's a big part of the fun of it for me, is like not even so much what is the poem saying, but like what is this going to look like ultimately. How is it going to sound, and what's the feel of it going to be? And it could be, I like to work in a lot of different short forms, and I don't, when I have an idea originally, a lot of times it'll just be a notebook. It'll start with a notebook jot down thing. I just take a lot of notes, on a daily basis of phrases that sound cool, or observations, or just things that cross my mind. And then at some point there'll be a concept that will hold some of those together into something that can become a piece of art, like a work. And then figuring out how they're going to be is fun. I like that. So I don't necessarily always know if it's going to be verse or prose, and I like the play between the two. I'm always just writing poems, and then at some point I see some synergy between a group of poems and start to think about a collection of poems, and that's, I'm sure, what I'll do now. I don't know what the timing will be when I'll start to sort of feel like trying to collect poems and think about a new book. But beyond that, not really. Like, I do have a couple of prose ideas that won't go away, and I can't figure out them either. So I don't know what will happen with those. But other than that, I probably will just keep writing poems. It's just sort of a part of my dailiness. It's part of living, really, for me, because I'm always looking to experience things in relationship to how they can be art. And so it really, like, that works both ways. Like, I find art in things, but then I also think it affects my approach to the world sometimes, and hopefully not in a bad way, but where I'm going into situations in a manipulative way, looking for material to take away from them. I worry about that a little bit sometimes, that I'm not like in the moment enough at times, or that I'm always just looking for, like, that I'm out with my friends and I'm waiting for somebody to say something interesting that I can write down. I don't think it's really a problem, but it's just my way of saying that that's probably what I'll continue to do, because it's just really become ingrained in me as part of how I do life. I think that Wisconsin's poetry community is healthy, and there are lots of good things happening and lots of good poetry being written. And I do think that I would like to see like more opportunities and exposure for younger poets in our state. Like, I just feel like a lot of times in the official spaces of our state literary culture, you're seeing work by people my age or older, 45 and up. And I understand that a little bit, especially in poetry. Like, there's a maturity that you can get to as an artist, and it becomes like you can produce your mature work in your life, and you have longer and more opportunities to get your work out there, and so people know you more. But I just know there are a lot of awesome young writers, and I don't always see spots in our sort of state culture, our state official literary culture, that celebrate specifically the work of writers, under 40 or under 30. And I think that would be good. I think it'd be healthy and fun for everybody to sort of realize that there are younger voices coming up, and to encounter that freshness of perspective and that new, vital energy that the state literary culture will need ultimately. So something to start a ball rolling in that way, yeah, I think would be good. So I want to start by reading a poem from my first book called Nervous Systems, which was a 2007 National Poetry Series selection. This is my copy, that's why it's all stickered up. I should have brought a good copy to show. This is a poem called Manifest that was written shortly, not too long after the 9/11 attacks. And one thing that happened after 9/11 that was interesting in an environmental, like a climate way, was that air traffic was shut down for 3 days or 4 days right after the attacks. And some smart climate scientists at Madison realized, like, this is a window of air that we'll never see again. There'll never be 4 days where there's no air traffic. And they took climate data in order to try to understand the actual impact of air traffic on climate and global warming. And that idea sparked this poem. I was out on a nature walk with my daughter, I think her maybe first or second grade class at the time, and thinking about those scientists studying the climate. 12,000 versions of 12 dozen ivy blossoms in the compound eye of a dragonfly. Shoulder-wide crevice opens above a gravel run. Bottles and a condom we decided not to touch, part of the preserve. Grove of future dirt surrounds a cluster of brightly clothed children. One of them, as they say, is mine. Near the scout shelter along the tracks, a woodpecker harvested termites from the decaying limb of an ash. Sawdust sprinkled over the sumac's beseeching leaves. The idea is that we're getting what birds are just doing. Who drew that white line on the sky? Mine spied the day's first vapor trail, passenger plane on the hop to Chicago. By 9, it's diffused, combined with others of its kind, and high cirrus. One white charge snaps through made weather. 12,000 versions of 12 dozen blossoms in the compound eye. Then I thought I'd do a poem from kind of my middle book, Absentia. This is a narrative poem. It's called The Pinky of Great Sugi. Great Sugi is a tree in Japan, a ceremonial tree. It's very old and it's protected, and people will go to see it and ask it questions, and it's kind of revered as a wisdom symbol. I used to live in Nevada, and in Nevada, in Great Basin National Park, out in the eastern part of the state, near the top of Wheeler Peak, there's a grove of bristlecone pine trees that are very old creatures. And there's a story, in fact, of one of these trees that was thought to be very old, and in the 1970s, that the tree had a name. It was called Prometheus. It appeared to be the oldest of these trees. Nobody was sure how old they were, and one scientist cut Prometheus down, and they weren't protected. It wasn't a park, or they weren't protected at the time. Cut the tree down and did a core study of it, and ring study, and to his horror realized that it probably maybe was the oldest living creature on the planet. It may have been 10,000 years old. The story is well documented and told in many different places in many forms. You can read about it, and there's a Radio Lab episode about the guy, and it kind of ruined his life. He left his academic post. He had death threats, and I don't know what he ended up doing, but I had just been up to see the bristlecones at Wheeler Peak, and not long after that I had the experience that's recounted in this poem. The Pinky of Great Sugi. I ended up talking with a young botanist who seemed a little lost at a bar party. I'd recently seen the bristlecone pines at Wheeler Peak, and he listened as I described the hike, the strange entangled trees clinging to granite, and the stump of the dead Prometheus, once the oldest living organism cut for research. He walked away. I worried I'd bored him. I lingered at the edge of other conversations, and a bit later, he came back right to my shoulder. More visible in the bar-back lantern glow, his face a figure 8 between lamb-chopped sideburns, eyes set apart and flush on mine, assessing. He handed me a small envelope with something like a cylinder inside, and he said, "I couldn't believe what you were saying before. I just returned from Japan, where I visited Great Sugi of Kayano. No exaggerated sagebrush. Sugi's 160 feet tall, and at 7,000 years old, he's earned the status of a priest. Commoners and emperors alike approach him with questions about their lives. I went to see the old master, but met a protective barrier. Why had I imagined I would be able to touch him? Thwarted, I felt the mystery of my journey fading. Then standing there, with head hung low, I noticed scattered sprigs that could only have belonged to Great Sugi. Suddenly revitalized, I picked one for my mother, one for myself, and one for my partner here in Vancouver, who felt very near to me then. I had not arrived with a question in mind, but after receiving these gifts, I felt eager to take instruction from the oldest being I had seen, and so I asked, "Great Sugi, how will I ever let go of this living?" I waited. The wind blew the same. Birds continued to dip and dart. Tourists posed and smiled. I offered a bow and walked away. When I returned home just 3 days ago, my partner was gone. His life with me was wrong. He left a note I hadn't even known. I tapped the envelope into my palm, a twig like a pinky, run with thorns up the bone. "It's okay," said the botanist. "I want to be alone." He returned to the dim, busy scene, and I tried to handle the barbed relic, detached but still integral, potent, resistant to the touch. This is my most recent book, You Are Still Alive. The title of the book comes from an artwork by Landon Sheely, who is a lacrosse-based artist, and you can see his work online at landonsheely.com. The title, You Are Still Alive, comes specifically, the text comes from a work of his. And when I saw it, I just realized that I wanted that to be the title of the book I was working on. It had a different title at the time. And I talked to him about it, and he was very cool about it, and I'm grateful for that. So this is a poem called Sorry I Can't Design Your Futuristic Bug Creature. It won the Science Fiction Poetry Association Prize a few years ago. In hearing this poem, you have to imagine that you and I are at a bar and we're talking, and you are a screenwriter in Hollywood, and I am a special effects designer who is turning you down. Sorry. Sorry I can't design your futuristic bug creature. The problem is, I'm already making a sci-fi trilogy about a cruel beetle race, originally based on the eastern eye click beetle, but with the sheen characteristic of the neon weevil. I designed the neural ganglia center in the middle of their pointy little faces. A totally fake thing I invented that caused gag reflexes in focus groups, triggering the influx of backing funds that subsequently earned me the very contract that's buying these vodka crayons. Which, yes, awesome. Thank you. Unfortunately, they've got me in a non-compete. So also, no. Bummer. Sorry. But hey, can I just tell you that it's true? The future seems predictable in the first two. Human depravity and global collapse. Bugs emerge from festering pustules, less evil than opportunistic. Block by block, the major cities are devoured, while plagues o'erwhelm the countryside, until, somewhere in Saskatchewan, the final human is sucked down by the glistening hive. Yada, yada, yada. But in the new one, when the millipede kingdom emerges, based on the wisdom of telepathically cooperative industry and the bitchin' karate possible for creatures with 1,000 legs, the numbers shoot through the freaking roof. These beetles don't just succeed in inheriting the Earth. Eventually, they harness cosmic forces and sail into the great beyond. Then the question is just so real. Will they handle their cosmic power better than we handled ours? Whoa, I know. Really though, all I do is make their faces look gross. One beetle makes interesting squeaky noises and the caption reads, "Beetle Love Song." Then these two iridescent peds push their faces together in a kiss, and it's like 8 mucousy strands of feces licking at an old brown tomato. And that's my thing. That's where my craft makes an impact on this town. You know what I'm saying? And after that, it pretty much just ends. Two lovers head out to sea on a leaf, probably tragic lover suicide, which raises the question, does anyone want to live in a future where beetles commit suicide? But there's a chance they'll survive, and maybe mate and mate and mate and mate and rapidly evolve into an amphibious species that could rise in yet another sequel like huge lobsters on the shores of the millipede capital and wreak havoc against the heartless kingdom that shunned them. So it's an ending. But is it also a beginning? Whoa, I know. Hi, this is William Stobb, author of You Are Still Alive. Happy National Poetry Month.